this attack on the Black Sea Fleet in Sevastopol is a major blow, is a major demonstration to the Russians that they're not safe, they're not secure, that the Ukrainians have the capability to attack and do great damage to their forces.
President Volodymyr Zelensky, and talking of Canada, met with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau today and thanked him for his constant support to Kyiv. Canada, which is a staunch backer of Ukraine and also home to the world's second largest Ukrainian diaspora, is sending more weapons to the country during President Zelensky's visit. The trip follows an announcement from President Biden, which confirmed the US will provide a small number of long-range missiles. Also today, a Ukrainian missile strike has hit the headquarters of Russia's Black Sea Fleet in Crimea. And people are saying, well, it's one of those missiles that has been used. So earlier this evening, I spoke to William B. Taylor, Vice President of Russia and Europe at the US Institute of Peace. He's also former ambassador to Ukraine. And I asked him what he made of Zelensky's North American tour.
So clearly, President Zelensky took advantage of his visit to, as you say, to New York, Washington, and to Canada. He made a good impression in all places. He had an opportunity to talk to the world community and at the UN. In Washington, he was a whirlwind. He was peripatetic around this city. He saw the House and the Senate and the Defense Department, over the Pentagon, business leaders, and then, of course, with President Biden. And then, as you say, the talk to the Parliament, Canadian Parliament, and the commitment of new resources from the Canadians, additional resources from the Americans. There's also, Henry, a report today that one of the weapon systems that President Zelensky has been asking the Americans for months and months, may now have been approved, possibly as a result of President Zelensky's conversation with President Biden.
Can you tell us more about that weapon system and what it might be able to do?
Yes, sure. So it's a long-range missile system, artillery missile system. It's known by its acronym Atackums, and it stands for Army Tactical Missile System. And the range of Atackums is a little bit longer than the British Storm Shadow and the French Scalp, but it's the same idea. And it allows the Ukrainians to fire at targets deep into Russian-held territory, deep into Russian-held occupied Ukraine, including Crimea, which gives them the ability to target reserves, that the reserve units that the Russians might be moving to counter the possible success of the Ukrainian counteroffensive. So this is a long-sought weapon that had been under discussion by the Americans for, again, months and months, and it seems like the reports are, the credible reports are that an announcement of this will be made, and the timing suggests that President Zelensky was able to convince President Biden of the merits of this decision.
That's right, and it emerged today, did it not, that Ukraine mounted another successful missile strike on, and we're told it's the headquarters of Russia's Black Sea Navy in occupied Crimea. Just how significant are these repeated attacks, would appear to be successful attacks, on what's meant to be the pride of the Russian Navy?
Very, very impressive, very important demonstration that the Russian occupation of anywhere of Ukrainian territory, in particular, as you just said, in Crimea, this attack on the Black Sea Fleet in Sevastopol is a major blow, is a major demonstration to the Russians that they're not safe, they're not secure, that the Ukrainians have the capability to attack and do great damage to their forces. And so the Russians are going to have to consider whether or not they could actually stay in Crimea. They may have to withdraw at some point from Crimea if they are attacked so effectively.
How likely do you think that is, given that there's an awful lot of pride at stake in this? President Putin has appeared pretty unbowed when he's invited visitors to his country, most recently Kim Jong-un. And when we've seen him taking part remotely in the BRICS summit and the Shanghai Security Cooperation summit as well, he's been talking about a multipolar world. So how difficult will it be for him to accept that, short of using a tactical nuclear weapon in a conventional theater, he's struggling?
He is struggling. You're absolutely right, Henry. He is struggling. And the nuclear threat has to be taken seriously, but is very low probability. The Chinese have told him not even to consider that, not even to consider talking about that. And more recently, he has taken that advice from the Chinese. So that is that. But he may not have a choice. As you say, the conventional sphere and the conventional weapons, the Ukrainians are catching up, are demonstrating that they've got as much capabilities in the theater as the Russians. And the Ukrainians are pushing hard on the ground. There are reports now that the Ukrainian military, even armor formations, have broken through some of the lines, some of the Russian lines in the southern part of the country. This, in addition to these long-range missile attacks, probably Storm Shadow and Scalp on the Black Sea Fleet, all are indications that it's not, that the military effort, the Russian military effort, is not going well for Mr. Putin. He may have to consider withdrawing or asking for negotiations.
And talking of which, we have the UN General Assembly taking place in New York this week. Most world leaders are there, although, of course, Mr. Putin isn't, and nor is President Xi. And one wonders what possible diplomatic initiatives are there at the moment, because when President Zelensky made his speech, the Russians, well, certainly Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, walked out.
So Sergei Lavrov was not present for President Zelensky's speech, nor was President Zelensky present for Lavrov's speech in the Security Council. Yeah. So you're right. There does not appear to be any prospect for negotiations right now. And my comment earlier was that when the Russians are pushed back, when their military effort is shown to be failing, they may change their attitude toward negotiations. They may seek negotiations to try to salvage something out of this. The Ukrainians are not interested at all in allowing the Russians to salvage anything of this misguided invasion. So the Ukrainians will probably not be interested. The Ukrainians, however, and President Zelensky has made very clear at the Security Council in New York this week that he has a peace formula. He has a 10-point, very specific peace formula that he has presented not just to the Security Council, but he's also presented it to the international community in several international meetings. One in Copenhagen last spring, and then again in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, in August. So, and at that point, at that meeting, the Chinese were present. The Russians, of course, were not. They were not invited. The Saudis did not invite the Russians. The Saudis invited the Chinese. They showed up. President Zelensky's team presented this 10-point plan, the same 10-point plan that he presented in New York at the Security Council, and there was a lot of interest in this. So he's got a negotiating plan when the key here is he's ready to negotiate when the Russians get out of his country. That's all he's asking. Just the Russians leave his country.
And that was William B. Taylor, Vice President of Russia and Europe at the U.S. Institute of Peace. And he used to be ambassador to Ukraine.